Hello, everyone. My name is Becca Connors, pronouns she, her, and I am one of the co-directors of the Notebooks Collective. We are a virtual literary arts space focused on community, connection, and continued learning. The Notebooks Collective believes that Black Lives Matter and acknowledges that as a virtual organization, our offices are on the unceded lands of the Kickapoo, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket tribes. Native peoples across the world continue to preserve and celebrate their cultures, and we encourage you to support Native writers and artists. And we know these are very stressful times, and we are glad that you have joined us tonight to celebrate community. And so now I will welcome Lisa to introduce our speakers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Allen, pronouns she, her. I am also a co-director of the Notebooks Collective. And if you've been to any of our previous In Conversation events, you know that both Becca and I feel really, really lucky to do this work. It even feels weird to say work because it's kind of a joy to do all of this. And we've even gone so far as to say that it's selfish because it affords us a front row seat to conversations that astonish us in new and unexpected ways. What we're doing also demonstrates the worth of community. And this tonight is a perfect example because it was one of our guest poets, Quentin Collins, who suggested tonight's event and brokered the introduction between Becca and I and our three poets. While Quentin couldn't be here tonight, we want to thank him for helping us bring together these excellent poets for this reading and conversation. Though they have different trajectories, each of these poets come from different places. They all have intersected at some point, and it's these threads that we'll be pulling on tonight. Jason B. Crawford, pronouns they, them, is a writer born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Lansing, Michigan. Their debut full-length Year of the Unicorn Kids is out from Sundress Publications. Jason holds a Bachelor of Science in Creative Writing from Eastern Michigan University and is the co-founder of the Knights Literary magazine. They are the winner of the Courtney Valentine Prize for Outstanding Work by a Millennial Artist, Vela Chapbook Contest, Variant Lit Chapbook Contest, and the 2021 Outright Chapbook Contest winner in poetry. Jason was a finalist for the Tom Howard Margaret Reed 2021 Poetry Contest. Their work can be found in Split Lip Magazine, Glass Poetry, Four-Way Review, Voicemail Poems, Freeze Ray Poetry, Had, among others. They are a current poetry MFA candidate at the New School. Nicholas Goodley is the author of Black Swim, published by Copper Canyon 2022. They are a team member of the performing arts platform Fly on a Wall, an assistant poetry editor for the Southeast Review. Nicholas was a finalist for the 2020 Jake Adam York Prize, runner-up for the 2019 Cave Canem Poetry Prize, and recipient of the 2017 Poetry Society of America Chapbook Fellowship, among other awards. Their work has appeared in The New Yorker, Boston Review, Bomb, The Poetry Project, Lambda Literary, Narrative Magazine, and elsewhere. And Malcom Tariq is a poet and playwright from Savannah, Georgia. He is the author of Heed the Hollow, published by Graywolf in 2020, winner of the Cave Canem Poetry Prize and the 2020 Georgia Author of the Year Award in Poetry, and Extended Play, published by Gertrude Press in 2017. He was a 2016-2017 playwriting apprentice at Horizon Theater Company and a 2020-2021 resident playwright with Liberation Theater Company. A graduate of Emory University, Malcom holds a PhD in English from the University of Michigan. He lives in Brooklyn, New York, and is the senior manager of editorial projects for prison and justice writing at PEN America. Please welcome our poets.
Hi, I forgot my face was going to get big on the screen. Thank you so much for those great introductions. I'm really excited and happy to be here. Happy to be here with Jason and Nicholas from, I don't know about you two, but it's my first reading of the year, and what I think has been a good week mostly so far. And this is, I think, the most eventful thing happening, so happy to be here. When you were reading the bios, I almost started busting out laughing because Jason thought I don't know if this is the first time we met. Jason thought I won. I was nominated for the National Book Award. I definitely was not. And they kept trying to tell me that I was. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I was not. That's one of our stories that we often share. Okay, I'm going to read a few poems and then hand the floor to Jason, actually. The first poem I will read is called Fucking a Proclamation. The only thing, you don't even need to know this, but it's fun to know. When I was a Cave Canem fellow, every day I would have a question that I would ask. It's like a random weird question, and people would answer it or try to answer it, and it would be just like a discussion for like our lunch and dinner conversations. And so the first line of this poem was the question of the day. What if the ancestors are watching us fuck? I wouldn't mind their inspection. My aunt's doubled over laughter at your hands lock on my ass. I've come this far to surrender, witness to the crashing of our bodies. And if she is smoking, she passes the joint to a grandmother whose neck is clasped tightly by the missus, flinging in rhythm to our swinging, still sucking and blowing the smoke into our faces. Be they privy and proud of what our tongues have made of lashing, how they've learned to call fleshly desire into the living. We fight and call it want. Your hands bury me as a matter of need, for coming this close to death is our own doing and undoing. The ancestors are watching us fuck, and I'm holding your backs unmarked smooth, my mind still a scatter. For the man has told us we're no good for anything but fucking. Our bodies are material interests, the wood frame balancing another, the paper map marking so many journeys but our own. Called brute, savage, boy, we suck dicks but they are hard to swallow. Every bit is but a sight of terror. The rope, kissing the neck, embracing the ankles, the wrists, my mouth stuffed with your fingers, still tasting of blood, is but for how I choose to undo. How to fuck in spite of. When you shoot, there I am, and so is the uncle's uncle, our baby mama, our daddy's head, knocked up by the master's pistol cock cracking cranium. Oh, the faces I've pillowed and longed to forget. The ancestors fucked between tabby walls left to ruin. On dirt floors they fumbled, leaving seed inside the earth's bottom. Lover, we are furious flowers, and just as brutally I'd ride a dick to save my life's joy. And if the ancestors are watching on this night, they've praised this woeful bottom. They've clapped in rhythm to the headboard. They've stomped with every crescendo, caught gasping for air, for finally this body is open, and this body, it is mine. I'm next going to read from, I don't usually read this poem because it's a little long, but also it's a little intense, but I do like to give like a warning before. But maybe it's an okay poem to read virtually because people can turn off their cameras or sound and take space if they need to. So this is an erasure of a book called 100 Years of Lynching. And it's like vignettes of kind of like a Car Walker, if you're familiar with her artwork, just like silhouettes, tapestries of silhouettes, kind of that's how I imagined it. And lots of language about racial and sexual assault, I'll say. The book 100 Years of Lynching, it basically categorizes, I'm forgetting the years, it was published in 62, but it's an account of various lynchings and racial violences throughout, I think, from the end of the 19th century into the 20th, like newspaper clippings and everything. And so I erased the book and got this long poem called One Yearning. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read some sections. I'll probably take like a minute or two, but I can, if people turn off their cameras or sound, I'm going to type done in the chat when I'm done with this poem, and then I'll read a poem or two. And that's it. Okay, One Yearning, an erasure of reports compiled in Ralph Ginsberg's 100 Years of Lynching, 1962. The first Negro history was taken from bed, gagged, bound, and received a writing over a little white mobbed, fully handed, seized, picked up, rushed, and made for torture, noble country labor. Surround the small sapling, fasten and watch, eat his flesh, his body, witness the contortions of his extreme agony, his fiendish deeds with unfeigning satisfaction. Blood was left to tell the story, the bone snatched by people who fought over the body, seeking one possessed occasion. Only murmur was plunged into his flesh. Believe it, the first lick at his feet, the crowd was satisfied with the play of no secrecy, seeing the head pinned. The anal savage, the exhibition, the world, the state, the best devil man, the spectacle, the flesh, the bones, history makes the fact. The nation, the thousands, the centuries, the naked, the primitive man, the victim, the religious, the desperate position, the great work. The rise, the quiverings, the writhings of the frame, the jostling, the Negro loosens the upper part of his body, the relish of oil, and at last comes the man's release. The spread of what is left of a confession, the mob boast, more savage. The Negro loosens the upper part of his body, and at last comes. Face down for 2 hours, the crowd came and went. He was passed around several times. A boy continued asking for bids. Uttering ass, a large posse quickly bound hand and foot. The Negro broke. In the spirit of the affair, he said, inflict me. A fair request was granted. The people ordered the Negro faggot laid and driven deep. So that's it for that poem. And I'm trying to find a poem. So I'm from Savannah, Georgia, and I just was home for a week for the first time in a year. And it was a little intense only because I hung out with my cousins a lot more than I usually do, which was good because I got to see how they like socialize like as adults. So it was very eye-opening. That's probably why it was intense. It was very eye-opening about like my age and the level that, my cousins grew up to be or whatever. But at one point in one of the parties, I pushed like the record function on my phone and I like recorded our conversations because I wanted to get like the language of how we speak and also what we were talking about for this play idea that I have, but also just the language was just Savannah refuses to let language go in a way. Like it feels antiquated kind of in a way that I like. But okay, all that to say is that process I once employed for this book where I recorded my grandmother speaking about her life. And in the book, this poem is called Grandma's Black Bottom. Yeah, I'm going to read this poem and then I'm going to give it to Jason. So thank you all for listening, and I'm really excited to hear Jason and Nicholas and for the conversation, which I think will be a lot of fun. Grandma's Black Bottom. When I position the recorder, she straightens into narrative, every inch of lived detail gone asunder. She leans forward, looking back. I attend inquiry as I've done for years, converging on craft. What she refuses to say haunts this entire process of returning. Together we construct memory. This the bottom, she says, indicating this porch, this street, this same spot that born her, her mother shaped me, my mother and her billowing in the same space for nearly a century that claimed us, cost us our lives where we make our living our business. What we don't say is divided as communion. It creeps along the edge of the storied. And though I hunger for testimony, I have learned to listen and ask later for what will never come. What lingers in her request to not talk about her childhood? She still remembers to forget that. Everyone wants the strong Black woman with Sunday greens. No one wants to hear about the dirt she washed from them, the strain that went into the pot used in defense. Everyone wants the Black woman loud mouth and big, but no one wants to live in her loud space, silence, narrative, the distance dancing around them. Everyone wants pot liquor, but no one wants to cleave leaf from stem to salt the earth to dig into dirt toward the deep root. Silence is testimony. I take that as daily bread when she says, I didn't say anything for a long time. This is hard to imagine. For years, we slid along walls and waited out the shrill profane of Grandma's black bottom, her device against control. Perhaps this is the lesson, to say what I have to when I don't have to listen to what I'm told. I am this obedient a grandson, listening and listening and listening. To who else do I owe that much? We long for stories we aren't prepared to carry. Foolish of me, learned Negro, to feign scholarly with this conscious backwardness. Grandma speaks into the air waxed on repeat, her eyes on my steady moving pen, my forward glance. Thank you.
Malcolm, that was wonderful, as always. I'm so happy to be in this community with you, as always, as well. And Nicholas, I mean, I have been reading your book and it's fucking brilliant. You're fucking brilliant. So thank you for letting me be in this community with y'all. In true Jason fashion, I didn't know what I was going to read until about 17 seconds ago, and I still don't know. But I know I'm not going to read from the Year of the Unicorn Kids because I'm going to have to do a lot of that AWP. I am in an MFA program, and I've been writing some new poems. I have a thesis coming up. This is my thesis semester, which means another book. So I'm gonna read those poems if that's okay with y'all. New shit, as they say. And I'm actually going to read, so I'm going to read 3 poems. The middle of the 2 is actually something that I completed today, technically, because I just put more edits on today. So yesterday and today. And it is a contrapuntal. Only one person in this Zoom has actually read it. He knows who he is. But let me start with almost the theme, one of the themes of the new manuscript. Ars Poetica of Yeat. I know what gorgeous world I've built in this aftershock. I've mentioned the trees and they rot. How beautiful is that? I've carried some of my people on my tongue and left the rest dry. Gambled with who was supposed to survive. I folded the poem into a boat safe enough for my loves to drown by my side. I've tested the buoyancy of paper, money, or otherwise, all turned transparent as lungs. I've seen the blood. I must apologize for acting on what could have been a dream, lining my coat pockets in dust. I must have been foolish, but imagine a world of aubergine and mauve and thistle and plum. Is it not worth the sacrifice of bodies that could never enter these poems? Oh, holiest hope-filled thing. I wish to save you from the truth. There is no tomorrow here for things like us. I say us and mean a litany of flies, all black, wings crusting over the sides. I say what if and mean regardless. There will be flowers, but who knows whom they will be grown for. I speak of the trees and mean the dead air rapturing my hands. And maybe it took too long to write this. The crows have already missed the tickets home. Yeah, so I've been writing this manuscript that's basically thinking about Black exploration and it's Afrofuturistic and thinking about what if we took all the Black people off Earth and found a place where Black people just got to be safe. So what does that look like? So it's a lot of fiction molded with poetry, kind of thinking in the vein of like Eve Ewing, Octavia Butler, that realm. And it's been really fun to write. This one I read, it doesn't have a title yet. So if you have a title and you just want to like send me some title names, that'd be cool. I read Hull by Zan Phillips, and it really made me start thinking about contrapuntals and writing them in a different way than I'm used to writing them, but like writing a full poem first and then trying to mirror it with another poem that work both separately and together versus like I used to like write one poem and try to split it. And this is what happened. So I'm gonna read it both ways. Untitled. I knock over an empty water pitcher and the room swells in rage. You tell me you fear the police. I agree, and holding the back of your palms and quiet here, there's only quiet, a storm that tantrums itself into soft-tempered rain. We know if we break open the thunder, what soon shall follow. What good is violence? The bodies spilling with bloodlust when it only leads to violence. You kiss me like a fragile balloon, lips tearing at the baton. I am not without fault. I've taken from others. I have missed a call home to my mother more than once. I've sped, sometimes without a destination. I trace the cracks of the water pitcher and start to mourn. I've stopped believing in hope. I pray to a sightless bird that teaches me everything must burn for my survival. And like a devout follower of a god, I spill gasoline on everything. In silence, we stitch our wounds shut, considering the joy burrowing deep within my chest, swamping the bellies of the floorboard. Rust is awake, gathering in the corners of the flower bed. Death choosing the body most fit for its meal, a gut swollen in silence. So too does the body break, a clean knife fissuring the small of a thrashing creek. We speak of fear. We speak of the oblivion of an incoherent sky. We speak of how to siphon the blood into rot. The shell of me shatters into grit. My flesh severs, fracturing chalice, licked in stripes, taught not to question honor and for what is right. I fear the river's blue hand guiding me towards a mouth filled with bullets. I am a burgeoning engine, slicing the tinder of my finger. I rot the skin to bone. The law could save me from anyone but myself, misguided like a fool ready to call the soil. So come, reaper, come, bring me bloodied by their palms, a field moistened by my kin. If I love it, then it reckons with all the destruction. I pray the bullets they send are unholy and turn back to dust. 3. I knock over an empty water pitcher and the room swells in silence. We stitch our wounds shut, considering the joy and rage. You tell me you fear the police. I agree, burrowing deep within my chest, swamping the bellies of the floorboards, rust holding the back of your palms in quiet. Here, there is only a wake gathering in the corner of the flower bed. Death is only quiet, a storm that tantrums itself into a soft-tempered choosing, the body most fit for its meal, a gut swollen in rain. We know if we break the silence, so too does the body break, a clean knife fissuring open the thunder. What soon shall follow the small of a thrashing creek. We speak of fear, we speak of the oblivion. What good is violence? The spilling of a body, the spilling of bloodlust of the incoherent sky. We speak of how to siphon the blood when it only leads to violence. You kiss me into rot. The shell of me shatters into grit. My flesh severs like a fragile balloon lip tearing at the baton. I'm not without fracturing, chalice licked in spikes, taught not to question honor and fault. I have taken from others. I have missed a call for what is right. I fear the river's blue hand guiding me home to my mother. More than once, I've sped towards a mouth filled with bullets. I am a burgeoning engine, sometimes without a destination. I trace the cracks of water, the water pitcher slicing the tenders of my finger. I'm brought the skin to bone and start to mourn. I stop believing the law could save me from anyone but myself, misguided in hope. I pray like a fool ready to call the soil. So come, Reaper, come bring me to a sightless bird that teaches me everything, bloodied by their palms, a field moistened by my kin. If I love it, then it must burn for my survival. And like a devout follower reckons with all this destruction, I pray the bullets they send back are of a God. I spill gasoline on everything unholy and turn back to dust. A little long. So I'm gonna read one more, and it's gonna be a little shorter because I'm out of breath and I don't want to mess up my lipstick. So, you know. Another thing I started really doing in here is trying to think about flowers and writing about flowers. I know a couple years back, and still to this day, we talk about how like poetry and the political, and how Black people aren't allowed to write about flowers because we have so many other things we're supposed to write about. And I started a little bit of a series after Hanif Abdurraqib's How Can We Think of Flowers at a Time Like This? And I have a poem that's titled after that. How can we think of poems at a time like this? After Hanif Abdurraqib. I pass a creek that's still spitting up salmon to offer to its lover, the pond, which flows back its own salvific gifting, their constant exchange of gratitudes. My fingers sketch a legion of limestones back to the closest I am able to see of its birth, kiss the ash and ask if only my children could live half as long. That must be the point of all this war, to understand the durability of trees. I lay still enough to let a cardinal nest upon the divot in my shoulder and lay her eggs. And ain't that what it means to trust God, to bring life into a world that's looking to take you out and your kin, one stone at a time? Thank you.
Oof, that's incredible. I'm like, first question, how dare you? That was really, really amazing, beautiful. I'm gonna read 4 poems that I think just kind of feel like what I would want to read in conversation with you two. It's like one new, one old, one new, one old. So the first one is called Brief Origins of Slang. So brief origins of slang. Like breathing on a man, or making a meal of metaphors from his blood, or grinding him against your chest and hips, or feeling culture in mouthfuls, or whittling sincerity to the bone, making definition scarce, or fixing your lips to brevity, or drinking gallons of a boiling lake, or bending at the jaw, or tending to the magma running through your veins, worshiping the writhing moment, or celebrating the curve. The potential of your mouth is immense, or it is like moaning his name into a verb, or speaking beauty in terms of its ability to hold sunlight, or feral language, or becoming a babbling god, or growing 3 tongues. It is finding the easiest peace, giving every word you've got and losing your vocabulary, or purging thought, or silencing the angelic mind, or translating nothingness. It is a viral hammer hitting the nail on the sentiment's head, or I mean the universe, or I mean ball bearings, or bringing the quiet into a crackling fire, or letting in the word that's a weed, or the undergrowth, or meaning of its own making, disrupting the tongue, or scrambling the senses, or speaking through molasses and winter wind. It is believing what you say. The nipples are the nipples of the nipples. It is us crossing the line together and pretending it is simple as that. It is language's shadow, or like snakes in a cool rushing river, or the summer accepting its place, or it is the sun crawling on its knees. What can be worse than to dwell here and language is not the place for you, or what can be better and language is the place for you? Okay. This next one's a short one called First Poem. First poem I had ever written was about green bug because I painted one at school, or the painting came later to go with the poem, or the poem was about gold and was printed in rainbow letters, and the painting had a rainbow in it. The picture was a blue watering bucket, a butterfly, an orange and pink sunset made of vertical stripes, and a purple rainbow, and a rose or tulip. And the poem had a refrain. It was a song for class, or I wrote it for my dance teacher because she thought I was a poet. And I read it to the class, or just to her. She said, beautiful, or thank you. And the painting and the poem are in a frame together now. And it matters that where it all started was a good garden. Okay, I think this is a fun one. It's called Legendary Children. Legendary Children to the queer communities. One thing, it's like a ballroom culture reference. And I thought I'd read that because this one's called Legendary Children. We fear hell and ask for it. We self-taught. We shy lives, crotch stars, viper fingers, gospel writers, damn straight. We are charmed high on the light of the mirror. We arresting, no horns or veil, divine apple. We cocky golden fruit, forbidden flavors of heaven. We intrigue, a painting of knives, spectacular and adequate, top and bottom lips. We leave holes in walls like huge mice. Every orifice is glorious. We are in all the places where food has been. Angels appearing finally from the background, the threshold blasted open by our trumpets and tambourines. We are made of ice and bubblegum, bronze sculptures in the wake of a biblical dawn, heavy metal powder, audacious machine guns, all stamina infusible. We beneathers and abovers, we queer saints, ventricle cocoons. We have given new shape to our tears, a pleasure in the innermost pink. Desire is enough. We are in the business of need. We are unsuitable bowls transforming the real. We provoke. We are Angora cats in a dog park, serene length in a dark place, green roots in a neon earth, discovering our largest selves, nourishing the greatest of our beings. We are undoing a wound, victims of hailstorm. We raise beasts, nurse birds, air gulpers, seed swallowers. We are condemned waterfalls, spiritual fluids rushing into an orgy of waters. We are the glass bead water and the frayed water's edge. We are the current, harder than love. We are more everywhere than wildflower. We are blue-white mountains. What is the wind? A direction to run toward. We are the heirs of higher ground. We make utopias of each other. We put each other where love should go. Our power is magic, a reflection of God. We have tasted Lot's wife. She was delicious. It is one thing to have it and another to let you have it. And this last one's, yes, this last one's called Evening Prayer. So evening prayer. Who bestowed upon me this habit of wanting music from a pen, this addiction to the gentleness of vowels? What are these notes from people's heads? What is the point of being the last one to speak a beautiful language? I am a fraction of what I could have been. What else can I contribute? I am outdone by children with more to lose. A teenager instructing me how to breathe. These kids are quick. They grab the hands of their neighbors, pull each other safely up for air. There is your enemy and son, your wife and brother, your prize and secret cross, golden fleece and weighted cast. Heaven knows I want this to be a poem people reach for. How often have I told myself I am not strong, and time keeps proving me wrong? When snow doesn't come, when I am not enough, let me do the right thing and make a rope of words. Let it begin with me even now. There is richness beyond belief. Vulnerable warrior, what risk is there? We who already die in so many places, this not even the worst of them. No one line is revolutionary. No one word ever is. I am grateful for not dying yet. I inhale what is in front of me. Everything is changing. Young hearts, any love I can describe for you does not suffice, but you are worth my every effort. One day you will know love like this and write it better than I. Thank y'all.
Hi, friends.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, you're so talented. You're so great.
Thank you. You are.
No question, no notes. That's
No, no.
yeah. Go ahead, Nicholas.
I don't know. I was gonna say something.
Oh, okay. Well, I do have a question. So when speaking of Black queerness, specifically for you two, speaking of Southern Black queerness, what does space and safety mean and look like to
wow.
you?
I know that I feel, so I'm from Atlanta, which is different than Savannah, but they're all like the South in Georgia. But I feel like I've just been really lucky to have my version of the South is Atlanta, which is like Black queer Mecca. So I feel like I have this like extensive family of like queer support outside of my immediate family that I grew up in and felt nurtured in as soon as I started to like recognize my own queerness. Um, so I've been fortunate that way, but I know that's not obviously not everybody's experience, but I feel like I have like so many different versions of families. And I think that's the queer gift, is that how we get to redefine all these relationships and like remix what a family is and remix what love is to each other and what we can allow ourselves to mean to each other. And that means like different expectations, different asking different things of each other, accepting different responsibilities for each other, but like building a community within one another has been my experience. That feels like starting from the ground up. It's always really lovely. And I feel like really fortunate every time I talk about it that like that's where I came from. So that's where I find like my safety and my haven in space.
I think I would kind of say the same thing. I would though say that the it's like southernness, but also Black southernness, because I can't really separate the queerness from like the racial aspect, but definitely what Nicholas was saying about community and family. I I think that's really important in like who you have around you. Um, Sometimes with my friends, okay, a lot, I talk about how when people talk about queer culture, it's usually like white queer culture, and which is very different from how like I've experienced it, and places where I felt like welcomed. When I was in college in Atlanta, I went to Pride once and I was like, oh, okay, that's good, that's enough, and never really wanted to go back. But then I moved to Michigan, then moved back to Atlanta, and went to Black Pride for the first time. It was a totally different experience. I felt more like integrated into what was happening and wanted to stay, wanted to go back, and that is a rare thing for me. But it was one of the first times that I noticed the difference in the queer cultures. And I think a lot of that has to do with being seen, being recognized, and feeling like even if somebody doesn't know you, like you feel like safe with them. Um, yeah, that was my experience at Pride, and I think when I lived in Atlanta, both as like a younger adult in college, and then I moved back in my like mid-20s, mid to late 20s.
And hearing you say that too, I like, it's such a bigger pain to feel like ignored or even discriminated against in like queer spaces that are supposed to be like open for everyone. And then like you just experience like a whole new type of hurt of like, damn, I'm still like, I'm still not valued. Like, so yeah, when you do find a place that's like, that you're seen in that way, it's like a whole nother realm, which is why those are two separate things in Atlanta, and people have like criticisms about it, but there's Black Pride and there's Pride. And that's why it's necessary, because it's there's a lot of pain there if you're not ready for like to experience discrimination from that side too.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, they have the same thing in DC as well. They have like a Black queer pride, and they have like the larger, and they have a Latinx queer pride as well.
They have like a series of prides, I think.
Yeah, that gets like a bunch of them, and that for sure that is predominantly Black and brown people for queer people, and it going to that and like feeling not just wanted, but also like feeling, I don't know, like there's something about dancing to the twos and fours that I just love. But there's also something like it's something about being around your own people and seeing the joy in that space that makes you feel more welcome. And when I feel more welcome, I'm having a better time. I'm not on guard the entire time, because sadly enough, even in queer spaces, like you're saying, I'm still Black, and there's still a chance that I could be harmed for my Blackness alone. I can be singled out for my Blackness alone. If something happens and the police storm the club, there could be, I could be the person, right? But yeah, no, for sure, I definitely see where y'all coming from.
Okay, I have, Nicholas, do you have a question? I have a question. I just thought of.
Go, yeah.
Okay. Where do you, and this question comes from because I think I just know each of your work, like, I want to say intimately, but I know it. Like when I hear it, I know it. Um, and even like Nicholas, I was reading your book today, like on the way home from work, and I was like, oh, I don't know where I heard you read this poem, but I like knew some of the stuff in it probably because I heard you like at readings and things. But also we were at Cave together, and that was
Yeah,
I maybe I had read you before we got to Cave. But
yeah.
I just wanted to know, like, where do you all get your language from?
Hmm.
Or languages?
And I was gonna ask you, like when you talked about like antiquated language, like this is kind of an aside, but kind of like one of my favorite things on Twitter right now is when people put like I fear on the end of things, like they'll be like such and such and such, I fear. And I was like, that is an old Southern term. And now it's like back in this. I was like, why is that here? And it makes me laugh every time. But it's like this thing of language, like it can appear anywhere. Like I love that. And I think you do it too, of like combining. I had remarked that you like the way you combine like sacred and profane and like put it in the same space and share equal weight. I think even for, I think probably all of us, I know for me, is all of language is at play, is fair game if I remove like any judgments on top of the language. So like if you're saying like, if you're like, you have poems that talk about like bottoming, and like that's, in some people be like, oh my word, I'm like, that doesn't mean, it's just a thing. It's just words and it's just language and it's all there. And so I think like if you remove, like, I don't know, not remove connotations, but like work with them instead of fearing them, then you have access to everything. And I feel like also queer Black people, we have all the queer lexicon, we have all the Black lexicon, so we have a huge range that we can work with. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I think for sure removing, I'd say possibly the word that you're looking for maybe is stigmatism.
Yeah, that's what.
Like the stigmatism of like, especially when it comes to our language within poetic. So it's saying, oh, to have queer / Black queer language within a poem deems that poem to be no longer like canon worthy. I think by removing that connotation from poetry in itself allows for us to have such a like broad and deep like lexicon to actually work from. I mean, I'm really just pulling from the languages of like the people I grew up around, and the not just the people I read, but like, you know, some my friends, and like I grew up playing basketball. So like the people like I played basketball with in a way butcher day when I was a lot bit butcher. But like pulling from, you know, just growing up with my friends, and then pulling from like nightclub language and like ballroom culture, and pulling from like all of that tries to find its way into the poem for me. And like it's about, for me it's about taking the image and then taking another image that I deem as similar out in nature or out into something I've seen, and trying to mesh the two and see where they collide.
This is much deeper than I thought.
What were you thinking?
I was like, oh, I got it from this place and that place. I really wasn't thinking about like that, Nicholas, what you said about removing the judgment from something. Um, my answer to that was, and again, this was because I was home um, for a week. Um, that because I was home for a week, and then I went to Boston with my cousin, who's 4 years older than me. We were very close growing up, and I have friends in Boston, my own friends, and so we all spent New Year's together. And by the end of that trip, I realized that I was exhausted, not from all of the travel, but because I was talking to my cousin in a language and then talking to my friends in a language, all English, but it was different in terms of like, and it wasn't necessarily code switching. It was a lot of it is just like the language of the coastal South, especially the low country where I'm from. Sometimes it's very fast, and it's a lot of when I was talking about like the antiquated language, it's like things like people are still saying jive, and the only place that I've heard people say jive that I can remember is Good Times, which is from like the 70s, maybe 60s or 70s. Um, I mean, JJ was saying like jive turkey or something, but like people, the 70s, okay, like jive is like still a word where I'm from, and so I heard it countless times when I was home. But oh, what I was saying, oh yeah, about the language with my cousin, but it was a lot of me getting back into speech patterns, not being home for a year, getting back into it, and then abruptly having to go to Boston, where I'm talking to friends who are not from Savannah, and for my cousin who's at Savannah, who's from Savannah, who has lived in other places, even other countries, but like her language is still so Savannah. Um, but speaking of removing judgment, I think my sometime, well, a lot of times, the language of church and Christianity comes into my poetry. I haven't been to church in a regular way since high school because I decided to stop going. But I think just growing up, having that from like sitting in, I used to sit in church and write poems, and maybe that's why I like to sit in coffee shops and hear noise around me, because the pastor would be talking, and I would just not be paying attention, but I knew that language that he was speaking, and so it often finds its way into the work, and it's not from. I think I have to think about that more, like why does that happen, and it's not from. Maybe I just never took it that seriously, and I just wanted to use it myself. Like it sounds nice, even though it's probably not intended to be nice.
I mean, gospel by like hymns, the Bible is poetic in itself. It is a poetic leave it to Ajane to be.
I was about to say,
Hello.
He's coming in as soon as we're talking about the Bible.
Yep, so yeah, the language itself is a document of poetry, like the whole thing. It's just about how, and honestly, the Bible itself is also just a document of right and wrong, right? So like the stories in there are about morality. It's how those stories are taught and shifted and used for human interest and gain, where the fault comes in. So I think the language within the Bible itself is something, I mean, I use it within mine, and I haven't been to church in a very long time since I left the church choir. So I'm right there with you, Malcolm. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I was gonna talk with y'all about was, especially like all three of us like don't necessarily have a relationship with the church, but I would say, and you could say no, but like using prayer as like a poetic form. And I think like our draw to that is like out of like why do we do that, and why are we like attracted to that? And I was thinking like if so like if you we could be told what our relationship to the divine is, or we could investigate ourselves what the relationship to the divine is. And I think that's maybe what our like more prayerful poems are doing. But I'm curious what y'all think about that thought of, and what would that mean? I don't know.
Poems as prayer.
Yeah, if any of that makes sense or like appeals to you to talk about.
I mean, it was a Hanif that said, there's not a Black person that hasn't been touched by the church, right?
Mhm.
So, like, it's true. One way or another, we've all been some way, somehow influenced by the church. When I'm thinking of, and yes, it even comes in the new manuscript, when I'm thinking of the divine in itself, it's not necessarily speaking always to God or to a God. Sometimes the divine for me is my friends. Sometimes the divine for me is myself. Sometimes the divine for me is a piece of cheesecake. It's whatever in that moment is going to fill that entity for me, and give me what the divine is supposed to give, which is faith. So for me, that's when I'm working in that medium. That's what I'm trying to do.
And I'm even thinking of like when you talk about like things that the divine could be, I think like relationship to your muses or like how you even come to poetics in the first place could
Mhm.
feel like it's a relationship to a divine that you can speak to or are in conversation with. Yeah.
Do you, I've never thought about prayer necessarily with poetry, but I'm thinking about that poem I think it was the first poem I read about if the ancestors are watching us fuck. And I, not using that as a basis, but just in the journey of this conversation, thinking of prayer as desire. I think of Christianity, a lot of it is about desire and like
Mhm.
wanting. And a prayer could be, so I'm thinking right now, you like asking for something, or you giving thanks for something,
Mm.
both of which are about receiving in some way.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know if when I sit down to write, I necessarily think about that, about prayer and poetry that way. I think maybe the investigation sometimes can kind of get prayer like. Um, I don't know. Thank you for that question, though. I'm going to be thinking about it a lot now.
Yeah.
I have one other question that I really like. I thought about, kind of started with Malcolm, but then like listening to you, Nicholas, like there was a moment where in the first poem where you're almost starting to shape or warp a story that you're telling, right? Like like you're saying and or to like give us the picture of what your first poem is about, but
Mm.
each time it's still kind of like shifting and moving, so it's not this constant. So I'm really thinking about, like, especially when it comes to like queerness and relationship to the poetry, what do you think about like retelling a poem within the middle of the poem, if that makes sense?
What do you mean retelling?
So like the story that you're telling within the poem, throughout the poem you're also starting to shift the narrative, so it's not the same story that you were already telling.
You was lying.
Lying.
Oh, oh yes. I've lied. I've lied before. But I've only done it once from what I remember, which is in this poem called, what's that form? Oh, Shinto. It was not a Shinto. The title was even a lie. Oh, Shinto, in which the narrative precedes the lyric. Um, and that poem to me was kind of, yes, it's to the back, it's to the towards the end. I think the form of that, I wrote it in like a geometry. What's the adjective of geometry? Like geometry in school, you have to write a proof, like a mathematical proof. I kind of thought of it that way. So it's like it begins with like questioning certain things, and it's basically a journey of my thoughts, kind of. And that's the shifting thing. So not necessarily, oh, thank you, Lisa. Not necessarily like retelling it, but just like restating with like ethics and claims involved. I don't know.
And I know for mine, like the poem with I think the one that I did first was the one about like slang. And I wanted to like, it was just like a formal choice so that like there was no, it's as destabilized as slang is, like there's no one possibility is more right than the other. So if it's always and it's always like an alternative that it could be, then none of them are more right than the others. And that was like formally important to the context. And then I think I did it again in first poem, where it's a bunch of ors, because all that's beside the point. And the ending was the point. So I guess it's a destabilizing technique, like to make uncertainty within a poem.
Yeah, I'm thinking, especially within like You're the Unicorn Kid, how much of the book itself is trying to tell a lie to tell the truth. So it's like how much, or not really, more so trying to tell a lie to keep safety. So it's like, I think when I'm in a retelling and I want to shift that retelling in the middle of the story, it's to say everything I told you before was a cover for this real thing that is, like you said, like the point of the poem, but more so I'm like, these are all the layers I had to put on to be who I am, but I'm gonna peel that back a little bit, and then the retelling starts to like come in through the end where it's like, okay, here's the truth, here's the real me. This is what I've been trying to do this entire time, and I haven't been able to because of XYZ.
Yeah, I think like that's like queer theory, right? Like taking pieces of the real and like reimagining them. So yeah, it's exactly what you're saying, is like retelling, reshaping what is perceived to be there into what your imagination lends itself to be.
No, wait a minute. Go with me here. Did you all grow up calling lie stories?
Yes.
Well, I wasn't allowed to call something a lie. I mean, like,
So, but did you
you
say it
can
was a
say
story instead?
I couldn't say like to my parents like lie, like that was a bad word, right?
Yeah, that's a bad word.
Yeah, stories. You telling a story is closer. Yeah.
But you couldn't say like I mean, I couldn't say an adult was telling a story, but like, because that's also offensive. But like somebody like a cousin or something, they were definitely telling a story. All that to say that, Jason, your question is like the like getting down to the truth. But then if a lie is a story, like why just get straight to the story? Why get straight to the truth when I can take you on a story, kind of take you like a beneficial lie? It's good for you if you finally get to the truth, maybe.
What's it? Yes. It's like style. So stay with me. So a style is just as important as the content, as in like the style informs and is like saying as much as the thing being said. So that has a lot to do with queer storytelling or even Black storytelling and like telling stories. Like, so I'm thinking about when you're saying like, if I tell a lie, but the way I told you is like, gave what it needs to give, then like, that's fine.
That boy would be their time.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yeah, I think, are there any questions in the audience and or Becca or Lisa? Since we've been hogging the mic for like 40 minutes.
Oh, I think I want to, I mean, this has been fascinating and awesome, and like I just keep going, but I wanted to ask Jason, to talk a little bit about your contrapuntal form. I know you briefly alluded to it at the beginning, but if you could talk a little bit more about that, that would be dope.
Yeah, the contrapuntal. So I've heard it called, and also a syncopated form as well. So the way it works is you have a right column and a left column. If you were to read the right column by itself, it is a full poem. And if you read the left column by itself, it's a full poem. And then if you read them together, it's also a full poem. So you can read it all the way across, or you can read it down. One of the reasons that I am interested in this form in itself is because it allows for me to make a dual meaning for what the story is. So like when you're reading it down, like all the way down, it's going to give you a different meaning, different like it's going to give you a different story than when you read it across, because the rules are changing as you're reading it across. The language is changing. And I think before, when I was just splitting them in half, so I'd write one long poem and split it in half and then like kind of buff up the language on both sides to make it like fit. The problem is the idea of the poem itself was the full poem, and I'm just splitting in half. So I'm just making literally just a fracture in the middle. It's not changing any of the language. It's not really changing the meaning of the poem. But by writing a full poem by itself and then pairing it with a poem and going literally line by line. So I'm like, okay, does this line work on the next line? Also, does it work when I come over here? It really did allow for me to craft that larger story that I was really looking for. Yeah, and I will say it's my most successful contrapuntal I've ever written. I'm very proud of her. She's brand new, so like I said, I finished the second draft of her today, and she will be going out maybe for publication. We'll see.
That, I think what I found so fascinating about that was just the idea, like you said, of before just like fragmenting one poem in like cleaving it in half has a very different feel than when you merge two like poems together. And I know that I've seen other exercises where it's like take a poem from here, take a poem, and just like smush them, and that kind of like shakes up the language and shakes up the thinking. And so I'm just really excited to try that. I think I'm like, it seems like I'd never thought to do that before. So and it looks like we have a question from Ariana. Curious about how you put together poems for your books, the process of finding cohesion and through lines in your works.
And I was curious about this too. When Jason, you talked about that your book, you kind of knew what thematically where you were going. At like what point did you know that? Did it show itself, or did you? I have a hard time like saying like where a book is going until it's like finished, and like that's more in the editing process. But how are you thinking about, you're actively formulating a thesis right now, so I'm curious from your point of view, when you see what the book is about.
I have a fairly overactive imagination. I started off, prior to being a poetry major, when I was an undergrad, I was a fiction major. And a lot of times when I'm thinking of a project, I start from not every poem. So sometimes I'll write a poem and then it happens to fit into something. But every single chapbook, and the full length plus the one I'm writing now, all started from me sitting down and saying, this is what I really want to do, what I want to accomplish. So like and then the poems, then I start like figuring out how to write the poems. So for me, it was like, oh, I know I want to write this book about cruising, about queer desire, about growing up in fear. And I was like, okay, so I know I need my cruising poems. I know I need some queer joy poems, some dance club poems. And then I started to fill those gaps, fill those bubbles. And every once in a while I'll write a poem and I'm like, oh, okay, this one goes too. I also have this weird thing where like if I start writing in a mode, I'm able to kind of continue to write in that like mode. But once I'm out of that mode, it takes a lot to come back in. So I have to like get as much out as I can before I switch gears. Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like the poems, even thematically, feel, I don't want to say random, but I don't set out on any like poetic theme. So when they come together, it's I don't think I know until like the collection, until I have like 50 poems and I'm like, okay, well, it'll find itself in the order of like what it's about and like how it's progressing. So for me, it's just like I don't know that I can never like articulate what I'm headed towards until it's like almost finished. But yeah, Malcolm, how about you?
I think a little of the both, in that I have an idea of what's happening and I'll try to write into that, and then I want to say sometimes, but I mean I've only written one book. With Heat the Hollow, I was writing and um I think I realized what was, yes, thank you. When I realized what was going on, I did write the first and the last poem, or two poems close to the beginning and the end, before most of the book, and those two ended up being like bookends for what was happening. Um, and this is a little bit back to also to Lisa's question about form. Is I had written a lot, and then I wrote a bop, and the bop, because of what the bop requires, it helped me understand what a lot of what I had written, because a lot of it felt like that it did not belong together. Um, and the bop helped me kind of realize what I was trying to do and what was going on. So form to me is sometimes good for it, because it keeps me in check, and it keeps me like grounded in a way. I'm a Pisces, so I'm all in the clouds past that. And form, I think, helps keep me on track and just like vigilant about what I'm doing, instead of just jumping from idea to idea to idea. So it also kind of helps me like know when to stop. Um, what I'm working on. I think that a little bit of what you were saying, Jason, about like I'm trying to get in a headspace to write some poems, and it's been really difficult. But I mean, that's having to be patient with that. And maybe that is true for me too. What you were saying about once you're in it, you're in it, and once you're out of it, you're out of it. Because when I was finishing Heat the Hollow, I was very much so in it. I've never been in that zone before or after that moment. Um, and I don't know if it can ever be replicated again, but I was like writing to save my life, kind of, and also deadlines. But it's something about, and it could be because I had a sense of what the project was at that point, that I was able to be contained and just write into what I was already writing. Oh, what I was going to say, Jason, did a fire truck pass by you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I live next door to the fire house, and it started sounding, so I put myself on mute. I think it went from my street to yours.
Yeah, no, yeah. It just passed me. We're quite close. Literally.
Wow, I just wanted to put it out there that we're running close to the end of our time together, which is, again, like always, blows my mind how quickly this goes. So I wanted to see if maybe there was one last question out there or any final thoughts. And if not, we can go to, I know that it would be really lovely to close out with a poem each from all of y'all, if you don't mind. I think that would be a lovely way to close out, but I leave it to you.
I can read one more. Nicholas?
Yeah, that's cool. Let's do that.
Okay, great.
Who wants to go first?
Oof.
Do we all know what we're reading? Last?
I did, and then y'all, I don't know.
I'm just gonna read what I always read last. Maybe I should try to be different.
Different.
I think I know what I'm gonna read. I'm gonna try to end with some joy. How about that? So I can go first while y'all get your. This is also from the new manuscript, and it's the party I was talking about. I actually wrote an ode to it. It also has a very awful name. Malcolm, you probably know this once I say it. It has a very awful name. Ode to Bear Milk. And if we can retract from harm for just a minute to talk about Black bodies close enough to pass heat between their furred chests, a furnace of boys warming each other through an already too hot summer evening, light fractaling across a stone floor as a whole club unclosets itself into clanking chimes, a golden film silhouette that the fluorescent body in sweat, someone's son or daughter or unnamed body snakes across the dance floor to touch the swelling of another's jasper-light arms. In this tiny heat box club, there is more body than space given. There's always more boy to split open with our rigid tongues like fresh pomegranates, more flesh detaching and expanding into each other. And who am I to not call this beautiful? These old pipes unwinding into each other, a crashing symphony of musk dragging its way between us. I watch a soft silver boy trinket around the men. Another damsel flies his tongue into another's mouth, and another steals the stench off another's glistening armpits, and another glows a bright heat in the line for his undoing at the sextant, and another crawls his way backwards up a wall, knees stilted against the brick as he swamps the floor beneath him in dance, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and 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 and. Thank you.
Malcolm, you want to go, or I could go?
What do you want to do?
You could bring us home. You could go last.
Okay. Do you have a happy one?
Is yours sad?
Does it have to be happy? No, mine is kind of happy, I think. You're going last.
Whatever.
I think
Okay,
you
that's
should go
fine.
last.
That's
You
fine.
should
Go
go
ahead.
last.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Bottom power. Praise the bottom of USA, her blood and sweat in spite of death, deep gulf, spinning sea, stretch of moist marsh cultured into giving, whose salt trails trail into the vast forever and unknown. Praise the plush bottom of USA, its tangle of fiber a seat in sanctuary, the soft, pulled from bowl by hard hands, afterlife living in the leftover lush of prize. Praise the hard bottom of USA. His cane erected woefully in your honor, sweet juice on the chin, the return each year bent on living, whose seed lives on in rich, rum-filled romance and rife abandon. Praise the soft bottom of USA. Her sugar tit still raw with rot of generations, her cotton gin gyration inflected into the games of children chattering rhymes on the street corner. Praise the sweet bottom of the South. Our heft of holler ringing into present tense, the lift of fists festered into submission, the perverse sway of swamp housing the hush of history, the hollow of saltwater cyclones seeing and sealing truth, our tapestry of tabby toppling over as testimony. Praise the bottom of the black bottom, everything lost and lingering, our bone of brick still breaking, our emptiness, our backward lick of life, our distant desire, our queer quiet, our will and want, our silent sighs exalting the cleft clit still singing in the labor of love. Praise the black bottom of the bottom. Praise the blackest bottom. Praise the bottommost black. Praise the black. Praise the black. Praise the bottom. Praise the bottom. Praise the bottom.
I love that one. Okay, this is a new one that I worked on last semester called Thunderbird Chorus. A picture of a bird becomes the real thing. Fold your head inside a paper wing. The natural world talks back. The edge of a celestial face, dribbling red quartz out of thin air. A page run out of music. True art is slippery. You are mad love conductor. Paint your hand into a bird. Writing has a purpose, or maybe not. God has a tummy full of cotton. The bird becomes the poem, eating song and fruit. Then it vanishes. I've seen light voguing until the moon became warm. A secret voice calls at the horizon, offering to trade your soul for the blues. This is the rest of your life, with no in-between. The thunder we make, a life that is only. And that's it.
Nicholas, Jason, and Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was an amazing evening. I would love if everybody would unmute and give a round of applause for our guests and their amazing work. We have shared book links for all three of our poets in the chat, as well as their social media and ways to contact them. Please buy their books and support them on social, and tell other people that they can watch this recording on YouTube once we get it up. We really want to help amplify all of these poets' voices, and you can help to do that. We would also love if you follow us, the Notebooks Collective, on our social media accounts, and to sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already. We promise we don't spam you. We send you stuff about events like this and good news about what's going on with people that we enjoy and admire. We listed those links in the chat. There will be a recording of this program available on our YouTube channel soon. And to the donors who help support this work, we thank you sincerely. Thank you everyone so much for coming to this event, and we hope to see you again soon. Feel free to clap again or let the poets know how much you love their program. Otherwise, we will see you again soon. Thank you.